Hey everybody, hey everybody. This is Ian McHenry from Beyond Pricing bringing you this week in Airbnb and beyond. And this week is our special HomeAway edition. We're truly bringing you the beyond part of our podcast this week. This week I got one of our esteemed colleagues, Cam, who is our head of growth here. Cam, welcome to the show. So glad to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Cam, if any of you guys are out there in the Beyond Pricing universe, you've probably gotten an email or talked to Cam at some point on that. He's kind of the man behind the scenes, and he was out with us last week at HomeAway's big Rezfest conference, which is their big annual conference for all the sort of property manager folks. So we brought him on to give you kind of a perspective of everything that went down there. This episode, we're going to give you kind of updates on what we heard there, all the exciting stuff, all the exciting news coming from HomeAway last week. And for those of you that are just pure Airbnb nerds, you've never heard about anybody else but them in the short-term rental space. HomeAway is a big public company, started forget several years before Airbnb, and they started in the traditional vacation rental space. So these are Tahoe, Lake Tahoe, other ski towns, beach towns, all that sort of stuff. Big public company worth billions of dollars, and kind of it's been played out as the rival of Airbnb. So it was really exciting and interesting to see sort of what went on there and how things are heating up between the two. So we're going to talk about that first, and then as always, we've got some great news about what's been going on in the last couple of weeks. We miss you for the last 3 weeks. Been super busy, but hopefully we'll be back more regularly. So the first bit of news and the kind of biggest thing that came out of the HomeAway conference was HomeAway buying a company called Dwellable. If you haven't heard of them, they were kind of one of the earliest folks to create what's known as a meta search site for vacation rentals on mobile. So if you wanted to find a vacation rental on mobile, kind of Dwellable was the go-to app for that. They bought them, and the reasons they kind of gave were, hey, they really like the team, they like the product, but they're really trying to bolster their mobile capabilities there. And I think, Airbnb, they've been big about their app. They had their Apple TV app. Whether or not anybody uses that, I'm not sure. But Cam, what do you think about this? HomeAway is kind of making an aggressive move into mobile and concentrating on mobile. Do you think that's important for them? Do you think that'll help them on the consumer side? You're 10 years my junior. Is everything happen on mobile now?
I think so. It's interesting to see the combination of both the Dwellable acquisition as well as Glad to Have You either a year or two back. It's interesting because that's kind of two parts of the mobile equation. One's the consumer-facing aspect of Dwellable, where they're actually searching and booking vacation rentals through the app, whereas Glad to Have You is actually like an add-on feature for the kind of guest experience. So it's interesting to watch the mobile shift in terms of both customer acquisition and then also like the overall experience that the guest has when staying at a VRBO or HomeAway rental.
That's a good point there, right? That's, one is the search side, right? And improving the search side. But the other one that Airbnb's kind of combined into one app is when you show up at that vacation rental, getting your house manual, getting all the information and whatnot you need. Do you think HomeAway will kind of combine those into one app? Right now, for those that don't know, Glad to Have You kind of is mostly used by property managers, so people that have 50, 100 listings. And so when a guest shows up, they can download the app for that home. Similar to you download the Hilton app when you show up at Hilton. Do you think they'll kind of combine that? Do you think they'll stick around with the standalone app for each property? What do you think?
I think they'll keep them as standalone apps. So I think the goal for Glad to Have You is to enhance the kind of experience of the guest. There was a lot of emphasis, and I actually sat at the table with a guy named BJ. I think he might have been the product lead at Glad to Have You. And the emphasis there is much more in replacing and making it easier for property managers to provide like insight, good restaurants in the area, the various rules of the house, because a lot of current properties have guest books and whatnot, which isn't horrible, but there was like a list of examples that the guy gave me that how modernizing it and basically having that your kind of guest book in the cloud per se is kind of the future of the guest experience. And I don't think that combining the two will ever, I think they were bought for separate reasons.
Yep.
And so like in this Market Watch article, HomeAway CEO Brian said that 48% of travelers coming to the HomeAway like booking site is from mobile devices. So I think that shift in general is the main reason for the Dwellable acquisition, and it will continually enhance the kind of online experience. And I think that they actually have an opportunity to kind of surpass Airbnb in terms of quality of the mobile experience, because I know Airbnb does have a ton of traffic, but I'd be interested to see the actual like booking percentages on mobile. And personally, I don't know if I'm 100% comfortable still booking a large ticket purchase like that on a mobile device, just because it seems so much kind of in a way more rushed. And if they can, even as a millennial per se, if they have a difficult time in convincing people to book on mobile, I think that's where Airbnb and HomeAway and this purchase of Dwellable is really pushing towards, to like enhance the trust and experience on the mobile side of things, to make people comfortable with booking a week-long $300 a night stay.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I wonder, Airbnb tends to have kind of shorter stays, more urban places, especially if you're just booking a private bedroom, it kind of feels like booking a hotel. It's not a big deal. It's a couple $100, whatever it is. With HomeAway, I mean, you'll have, I forget what they said the average ticket size, a lot of property managers, like the average booking is $2,000, right? Other places, we talk to folks out in Palm Springs, they'll have places for $2,000 a night. And so I wonder if what you'll see is, a lot of folks kind of exploring and looking at places on the mobile app and then finalizing their bookings on desktop. That
would be interesting to see how they like kind of build out that user experience. Because if they had a kind of like save for later, like a pocket type of feature where like the mobile experience is meant for browsing when you're like on the train on the ride home from work, wanting to like plan your next vacation, but don't necessarily want to book on the spot. I'd be interested to see how they bring in Dwellable to kind of create that experience, and where they're kind of shooting to actually get people engaged with the content that they have on their marketplace, or to actually finalize the purchase. So that'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And Dwellable, kind of one of their last features that they launched before their purchase was kind of a Tinder-like way to swipe through vacation rentals. And I think do exactly what you said, which is save them for later. They go into your swipe right file. And then if you can do that and then access that later on, when you're back at your laptop, finalize that booking, sort through those ones. It's a good point, because I know personally, when I'm looking for a place to stay, a lot of times, I'm not interrupting my work day to do that and whatnot. I'm usually doing it, on the bus home, or walking to lunch, or whatever it would be. And like right now, the mobile experience not being so great on HomeAway, that's tough to do. And I might actually just go flip over to Airbnb, because, hey, they have this, easy to look at interface. I can just flip through places. And so this might help HomeAway kind of jump right in there and take more of that kind of that user behavior and capture that. It all brings kind of to a different point, which I think you might have heard too there, which is a lot of people think about one of HomeAway's sites is VRBO. It's one of the bigger ones that a lot of people know, and it's kind of been hopefully HomeAway people don't hate me for saying this, but I think it's a known secret that it's been not as design friendly as their main HomeAway site, shall we say. I forget, there was a quote from one of their executives, something around when they were asked like why they hadn't changed it, and their answer kind of was that, well, we changed it, but it drove conversion down, and so they just stuck with what kind of works.
I'd be interested to see what metrics they are quantifying working or not working, because isn't it true that especially in kind of some of the HomeAway like marketplaces, close to, or at least short-term vacation rentals in general, close to something like 50% are still done over the phone and not online.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Am I totally off? Like, and I know oftentimes that's probably through direct sites, the property manager sites themselves. But just booking in general, it's interesting to watch. Is like Airbnb doesn't give an option for you to have a phone call with the owner. They actually block all that information. So they've forced this kind of online purchase, and I think that's good for the industry as a whole, because it's making people more comfortable with these larger purchases rather than like having to call and book something over the phone. I guess there are certain questions that people would probably want to ask and be able to have that functionality, but in terms of speed and like kind of with the proliferation of instant book across all these marketplaces, it's interesting to watch that HomeAway is improving the mobile experience, yet a vast majority of people booking vacation rentals in general still don't even do that online. So
Yeah,
we'll watch that.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Hey, hey, Cam, real quick, we're getting a little bit of echo from you.
Okay. Am good now?
Yeah, just we'll have you mute yourself when you're not talking. Hey, yeah, so increased concentration on on this kind of conversion, and so I mean it's clear, like, HomeAway's here to compete. They are a lot of tests that they're running. They talked about doing A/B tests on everything from showing rate tables. For those that don't know, HomeAway, traditional vacation rental managers would have a rate table that would say, in summer the price is this, and in winter the price is this, rather than hotel style where you put in a day that you check in and a day you check out and you get a rate, right? And that works because hotels will have 200 different rates, and those rates will change every single day. And so it's clear they're like doing tests to see, what they can do to have a larger percentage of people booking through there. One of the other things that kind of related to that they talked a lot about is, dynamic pricing. And this is a bit self-interested given that's what we do. But it was really kind of the first time that we've seen in the 2 years that, we've been in the industry, where this has really been kind of top of mind for people. And it seems like they're finally kind of starting to become sophisticated in the way that hotels are, and what happened with hotels like 20, 30 years ago. And so, as they do that, one interesting thing too with HomeAway is like HomeAway has to deal with a lot of people that are on multiple platforms. Whereas Airbnb has a lot of people, sometimes just renting out an individual room, or they don't see themselves as a vacation rental per se, and so they're only on Airbnb. And HomeAway has been pretty open about integrating with partners, whether it's dynamic pricing, whether it's these kind of channel managers, whether it's websites like Blue Tent, so that they're kind of the nexus of all that, and they still want to be the best channel for getting bookings for all these vacation rental owners. But they've kind of had this more open attitude about integrating with partners who can provide functionality that they currently don't, but then two, as we saw with the Dwellable acquisition, really acquiring companies for the purpose of building out their product, whereas Airbnb has kind of done most everything internally. The few acquisitions they've announced have been mostly for talent, it seems, except for like Crash Patter, which was like 3-4 years ago now, in London to expand their presence in Europe. But I don't know. I mean, Cam, tell me what you think. Like, it seems like it is. Are we going towards a period where HomeAway is going to be sort of the Google, and Airbnb is going to be the Apple in this? And if so, which of those wins, or do each of them have their own constituencies? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It does remind me a lot of the iOS versus Android debate, where Apple and their iOS department has always been very regimented and very strict, and really run all of the kind of management of everything that's going on in the ecosystem. They have, if not building even third-party apps coming on the system, the approval process, the very like strict, just closed ecosystem in general, that there's an Apple kind of overlord watching this entire marketplace. And I think that's kind of true in terms of what Airbnb is doing. They have been very kind of exclusive in terms of all the stuff that they build is for their own internal self. And it's interesting to watch HomeAway take a more Android style approach in opening up their platform to various companies and developers to kind of add value where they see fit. And it was interesting to watch the HomeAway CEO in his speech. He said, we're in an interesting business because pretty much every one of our clients and or partners is also potentially competition. And in terms of the actual bookings that are occurring, because all of these property managers would prefer if everyone booked 100% through their own sites. They don't have the marketing ability or even prowess per se to make that happen. So they need partners like HomeAway to source a lot of their potential guests, which is good. And it does remind me a little bit of the developer, third-party developer application usage in the Google Android ecosystem. So I think generally being more open sourced is advantageous in the long run. With that said, the quality control tends to be the kind of other side of the argument, where every Apple app is not buggy, like the quality in general is just a lot better. And it'll be interesting to watch how HomeAway kind of walks that line in terms of openness, and also like trying to maintain everything that becomes a part of the ecosystem is quality. So
Yeah, that's
they've done a good job so far, actually.
yeah, that's a good point. I remember, I remember talking to, like my cousin's daughter, and when she was young, she like always had an Android phone, right? And she liked it because she could personalize it. It wasn't all these restrictions. She could do whatever she wanted with it. Download applications that weren't back then that weren't even on the Google Play Store. There's just much more sort of freedom and it would advance sometimes faster than Apple in terms of functionality because of that open ecosystem. But me being old and, well, I shouldn't say old and crotchety, but just wanting stuff to just work and not caring, just not caring about all these other different bells and whistles. I just want a seamless experience, right? So it seems like they're kind of both focused on those different approaches to it. So we'll see how it plays out. One last sort of trend coming out of Rezfest, and then we're going to switch to a little bit of Airbnb news, was there's noted presence of some big property managers there, including Wyndham Vacation Rentals, which is kind of I believe it's a subsidiary or whatever, sister company of the Wyndham Hotels. And they have over 10,000 listings in the U.S. and elsewhere. Vacasa, which we've talked about a couple of times before, which is aggressively expanding. Now there's turnkey vacation rentals. They're kind of starting to be in all around the country. And then there was this sort of discussion about, is this the moment where the moms and pops that used to have 50 properties in Fort Myers, Florida, are going to start dwindling away and either be bought by these kind of larger, quickly expanding vacation rental companies, or just have not be able to compete. We saw this in hotels 30 years ago, where it used to be a lot of kind of independent hotels and whatnot, and the Marriotts and the Hiltons hadn't kind of taken over a lot of these properties and either rebranded them in a franchise model or bought them outright. And now, for comparison, 70% of all hotels in the U.S. are under a major brand like that, and so we're starting to see for the first time, that happen with vacation rentals. So yeah, the question is this sort of the future? Are we going to start having, like we've talked before, major brands in the vacation rental space, at least in these, kind of ski and beach towns? Cam, what's your sense? Do you think there's kind of two scenarios here, or three scenarios? One is we have big property managers, and they manage places, the majority of inventory, the majority of vacation rentals everywhere. Option two is all these kind of mom and pop property managers still exist, but they operate under the Wyndham brand, under a franchise model or something like that. Or the third option is sort of status quo, and really there's no economies of scale from having kind of a big brand in the space. Cam, what do you think of those, the future is?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there will be some collusion amongst some of the larger property managers in general, and I don't think actually having various
Collusion,
large brands.
collusion,
Yeah.
unwrap collusion.
With some, or either buying some of these smaller companies or merging. It'll be interesting to see if, like, Vacasa, for example, starts to they're probably big enough to buy, but if any, like, Vacasa competitors per se, out of like desire to stay important in their given market, if two 500 listing marketplaces come together to compete and like become these larger potential brands. And I actually think brands in the short-term vacation rental industry would be a good thing, because I don't think any major players right now are like common household names. And I think the proliferation in short-term rentals in general is a good thing. And I also think if there can be or multiple quality brands where you can stay and know that you'll get the same experience, whether it be in Outer Banks this year, and then you go to Maui next year and it's the same company. That would be pretty cool, actually. And just the quality assurance aspect of what hotels, and that's actually always been something that I think has been that critics of the short-term vacation rental industry have chimed, the fact that you can't really guarantee because every property is unique. That's true, but the experience as a whole, just the little details of that come with the accommodation industry, I think can be kind of standardized in a branding model. But it'll be hard unless there's a major investment from some of the traditional hotel firms. I think that they have these kind of hotel conglomerate chains, and I think that'll be much more difficult in the vacation rental industry because they don't own the individual homes primarily.
Yep.
Because they're still individually they're owned by individuals. If you're managing 200 properties and maybe you have 150 individuals that are the owners, managing those details in terms of like the payout, how the contracts and leases work, is much, much more laborious than owning 500 rooms in a hotel in Philadelphia or Detroit or anywhere, what these hotel chains are doing. And the upfront cost for the hotels is more, for sure, to build the actual physical space for these hotels. But it'll be interesting to watch the scaling of the managerial aspect if they do get into the multiple thousands of listings. Because I correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's no short-term vacation rental property managers that have over like 20,000 listings. And if they do, they probably don't operate as a brand in terms of the guaranteed like consistent quality. And that too is tough, because even if you do own maintaining like the expectation, if you are a brand, if you want to create the W of short-term vacation rentals, they have an easier ability to do so because the same kind of design elements, whether it be in like Tahiti or Puerto Rico, the W at both of those places are like fairly similar and consistent.
Yeah, that's a good point. But maybe it plays out where they're more like the motel chains, right? Where
like franchised.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you stay at a Best Western, there's certain kind of the general quality level, but like every single place is different, right? And it does, you definitely do sacrifice there. When you say a Best Western, you don't have the same feel that you do at a W. Not just in terms of obviously a W is nicer, but just like you don't know when you stay at a Best Western, like what it will look like, what the design elements will be, all those sorts, what that experience will be. All you know is it meets kind of a certain quality standard, and probably that it will have Wi-Fi and other amenities.
Yeah, and I think that's probably more the route some of these larger brands, especially if they continue to kind of take on or buy or purchase some of the smaller property management companies as they grow. I think that's probably the more sustainable model of franchising in a way. I have yet to see a perfect model.
Yep.
Even close to perfect. I think Vacasa has a lot of listings and are probably doing a great job. I haven't stayed in one of their properties yet, but once I do, it'll be cool to see how these various companies approach the user experience in terms of like franchising it, and what they require and what they leave up to the individual owner or the individual property manager that is the franchisee. That'll be cool to watch and see.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, that's great. It's been super interesting to talk about and get your perspective too, Cam, because you were around there. You got a chance to talk to a lot and sit in on a lot of different sessions with HomeAway. Lots of interesting stuff going on there in the traditional space. Stay tuned. If anybody has other insights, feel free to post comments on our SoundCloud, on anywhere where this is posted, or send us an email. We'd love to get your insights. Running out of time, but we're going to do a quick rundown of kind of the biggest news in the last couple of weeks on Airbnb. As always, it divides into regulation and Airbnb versus hotels. It seems to be an ongoing theme in our this week in Airbnb. Starting off with regulation, Orange County, the OC Register had an article that came out. It did use some beyond pricing data. It wasn't necessarily used in the right light, but I think it brought kind of more focus on vacation rentals there. What's interesting is there's been 2 cities, Anaheim and Laguna Beach, have now kind of put moratoriums on new short-term rentals. What's interesting here is these are actually places. Anaheim is where Disneyland is. Laguna Beach is a very classic, vacation rental destination right there on the beach, in Orange County, south of LA. And these are the places, this isn't, New York City, this isn't San Francisco, places that, have these huge urban housing crunches, and that never have had traditional vacation rentals as part of the accommodation option. These have had this for, decades and decades. And they just now are starting to, what they're saying is put a moratorium on it. They have all, like previously, they have a full permitting process. Like literally you go in there and you say, hey, I have this house, I'd like it to be a vacation rental. And you go to whoever it is, the county clerk or the county planning department, and you go through the application. This is common in many of these vacation rental destinations. But now we're starting to see them start to kind of think about how they want to manage it. And then at the same time, Jersey City, right across the Hudson from, I say that questioning, yes, it's the Hudson, from New York City, just legalized Airbnb for anyone. It sounds like the law is reading for anyone with fewer than 5 units. They don't even need a permit. And then after that, they do need a permit. Someone can correct me wrong in the comments if that's wrong. But and then of course they're taxing it. So Cam, what do you think about this? 2 traditional vacation rental destinations putting a moratorium on new rentals. Jersey City, far from a traditional vacation rental place, legalizing it. Is there any rhyme or reason to this? Is this just like is this just local politics where 5 people speaking up can kind of change the course of regulation in the city? Or what do you think's going on here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's actually probably more of a combination of the clientele for short-term vacation rentals in general. I think it was the last couple decades, I think it's been more of a focus on longer term stays, on family trips, even more organized friendly trips. And I think we're now seeing like college sophomores who are not even 21 are renting out a house in Manhattan Beach, where I'm from, and having a massive party, which isn't a bad thing, but the neighbors complain. And when you can have moratoriums on a local level of a town of 50,000 people, policy in terms of shutting things down is a lot easier. So it's actually kind of unfortunate that the regulation happens on such a local level, in my opinion, domestically, because we see internationally these countries like France and Sweden, they're passing national legislation, sometimes too strict. France might be a bad example, but there is policy that is being acted upon in a much quicker way that is nationally applicable. Here, it's kind of the opposite, where it's happening on the individual. My little hometown of Manhattan Beach, California, 35,000 people in 5 days can ban short-term vacation rentals because one group of kids has a party.
Right.
So that's kind of obnoxious, because it's really shutting down a core business and especially like Laguna Beach, that has had vacation rentals, and it is a core business and an investment in a lot of people's minds in the past when buying this potentially second house that they're going to rent out. That it's kind of sad to me that they're so reactionary rather than like working out. I think San Francisco has done a decent job. There are a lot of loopholes to jump through if you want to rent out a place in San Francisco, but the regulation is there, which is cool to see. And I don't think it's perfect, and I think there are other places that do it better, but it's getting the ball rolling on doing this legally. And I think the demographic that are like staying in Airbnbs is kind of the spread of the vast spectrum, is bringing in certain individuals that would not have even stayed in a short-term vacation rental, probably myself included, 5 years ago, prior to just this totally emergence of Airbnb, which makes these individual listings, booking it for a night, it does seem much more hotel-like than what 20 years booking a vacation rental in Lake Tahoe, for example, would have been like.
Yep. No, that's a great point. It's a great point. And yet here in San Francisco, they set some decent legislation, but now with Prop F coming around, they're trying to kind of change that legislation, again, within, I think, 12 months of the last stuff getting passed through. That we won't talk about that. Everyone's heard enough about that here, and we'll see. That comes up for vote in a few weeks, so we'll see where that goes. Right now, it seems, for those not following on here in San Francisco, Airbnb's hometown, they've spent millions of dollars trying to fight this proposition that was put on the ballot. It sounds like it will be defeated according to the polls, but we'll see. I think a lot of the country is kind of looking towards San Francisco and it's trying to see what they do. So we'll see where that goes. Last sort of story here, we got there was a really two kind of interesting research reports, and we'll post them again for everyone to read in full. One of them was it looked at the impact of Airbnb on hotels and their prices. And this has been a big topic because hotels are saying, hey, all these Airbnbs are cutting into our profitability and whatnot. And Airbnb is saying, oh no, we're not. Our places aren't in the same places that hotels are. They're in the outlying districts and whatnot. It has minimal impact. And so somebody looked at where the impact really is. And what they kind of came up with is, on a normal day-to-day basis, Airbnbs don't really have that big of an impact. But in what the hotel industry calls compression nights, which is kind of a strange term, but what it is, a hotel is going to be 95% or more full, or if the whole city is going to have 95% occupancy or greater, you have this effect where prices just skyrocket. They go up 3-4x, and we see this here in San Francisco for Dreamforce. We see this in Austin for South by Southwest and Austin City Limits. And what Airbnb's impact is it's dampening their ability to charge 4x on those nights, which makes sense. Like, that's why Airbnb was created. It was for those times when the city literally can't house all the people coming into town for an event. The hotels can't do that, and the hotels increase prices a lot. Now, when you add all this extra supply on Airbnb, you get kind of this overflow effect. We're all pretty familiar with this, where someone who maybe wouldn't have considered staying at an Airbnb before, suddenly when faced with, $700 a night for a hotel instead of the normal $200 a night, starts to check out this Airbnb thing that they heard about, right? And so that person who might have just booked that $700 hotel suddenly is booking an Airbnb, and the hotels aren't able to get all of those last 10% of guests or whatnot who are paying these outrageous rates. The numbers they came up with were something around that in the hotel industry between, I think it was 7 to 10% or so of nights are these compression nights. And that makes up somewhere between, or maybe it was 5 and 7, and that makes up between 7 and 13% of their revenue. So, even if it wiped out all of those days, it would have a 13% impact or whatnot on hotel revenue. But if it's just kind of chopping off those very top tier ones and just dampening that a bit, it seems like the Airbnb impact is only a couple percentage points on hotels' pricing power, which is interesting. I've talked to hotel revenue managers, and I think Airbnb is a great scapegoat if you're a hotel revenue manager and you're not hitting your numbers. You can always explain that you didn't get as high a rate as you were hoping because of Airbnb. So maybe this study will kind of hurt those hotel revenue managers who can't fully claim that anymore. But it is pretty clear that there is a decent effect for these compression nights. And then the second report that came out, which I think was interesting, Cam, I'm not sure if you got a chance to read it, but there was a study done in New York City to try to show exactly how much Airbnb is increasing rents. And what's interesting here is, they looked neighborhood by neighborhood, and in the majority of neighborhoods, Airbnb's made up 1% or less of the housing inventory. And there's questions about the methodology, and Airbnb responded and called out the methodology and whatnot. And so there's debate about exactly what that 1% is including. But what I liked was in the article, and the people that did the study, the outrage was, my gosh, Airbnb is making up 1% of the whole inventory, where you could flip the story and just say, oh, Airbnb is only 1% of the housing inventory. That's really not that much. And what they did is they used some sort of methodology that's been used before that says, hey, a 1% reduce in the housing stock equals X percent increase on prices. So with that 1% increase, I think it varied by neighborhood, but it was usually between $25 and $50 in additional rent. And this is in New York City, where average rents, are $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month for one bedrooms. Cam, what you read? Hopefully, did you get a chance to read a little bit of that?
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, does this seem like people are kind of grasping to try to put some science behind Airbnb's impact on housing prices and rental prices, and then even when the data seems to show that it's minimal, just trying to twist it to match their message? Or do you actually think $50 extra a month due to Airbnb is something to be concerned about?
I definitely don't think it's something to be concerned about. And I think the fact that Airbnb is a second income for so many people living in these major metropolitan areas whose rent is with Airbnb or not in the equation already incredibly high. Average one bedroom in San Francisco is something like $2,900 now, maybe even more. And New York's kind of similar. So in order to afford those prices, Airbnb is a solid option for hundreds of homeowners or even renters in these cities. So I think the $25 to $50 possibly dollar amount as a neighborhood as a whole is a great investment in the community in a way to allow the other people to maintain living in this neighborhoods where rent is getting so high that they might not be able to live there without actually using their apartment to rent out on Airbnb when they're not there. And I know Airbnb plays this topic up big time in a lot of their branding. But I think it is pretty true, especially with, I think the massive increase in rents in Oakland, San Francisco, New York City over the last couple of years is much more to do with the mass movement of new people coming, new urban professionals coming to these markets, as well as the economy is doing well. So rent has skyrocketed, and Airbnb is a tiny, tiny, tiny possible sliver of the equation of these increased rents. So I think it's totally unfair that they continuously just ignore these facts that show that Airbnb is actually probably overall much more beneficial for the communities than it is harmful.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. We see here in San Francisco, we see the data because that's kind of what we do. And, in the last 6 months or so, there hasn't been an increase in the number of Airbnb listings. There's been a slight, decrease, it appears. And in terms of the number of nights actually being booked, since they put the 90-day limit on it less than a year ago, we've definitely seen kind of fewer bookings. But at the same time, we've seen rent prices continue to go up, even though Airbnbs, are flat or going down in San Francisco. And so, I mean, that seems like a great indicator. And when you look at these, it seems like every month something comes out, and average prices in neighborhoods have gone up another $100 every month. And so $25 to $50 total impact when things are going up, much, much more than that in a place where it's clear that there's not an increasing presence of Airbnb like San Francisco. I mean, it seems like a pretty good indicator that it really is more macroeconomic issues rather than a reduction in supply due to Airbnb.
Yeah, in San Francisco, actually, I think probably the 200 engineers moving to San Francisco to work for Airbnb as a company living in Soma will have a much greater impact on the rising of rent prices than the individual people renting out. And that's true of multiple industries in a lot of these different cities, but the mass kind of migration of people continuously coming in and being able to afford these rising rents in these cities is definitely more of a has the much greater impact than what renting out 90 days a year on Airbnb in San Francisco has. So
yep, absolutely. Great. Well, this has been an awesome episode. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Cam, for joining us today, taking some time. And we'll be back next week, much more regularly now with the latest news and all of that. Be sure to check us out. Subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud, on Stitcher, on iTunes, whatever you guys use. And as always, send us an email if you have thoughts. Let us know what we can improve on the podcast. Let us know any guests that you want on. You can reach us anytime. It's always hello@Beyond Pricing. And thanks again. Have a good one.